south of the ancient city of Prague, stretching out from the Vltava River, lies an almost unknown and forgotten patchwork of lakes and wetlands, fields and forests. Yet what looks like a natural wilderness is in fact man-made. Ever since the Middle Ages, this patch of land in the south of Bohemia has been exploited by humans. Even an artificial river flows through the expanse of reeds and marshes. Nature was not destroyed. Instead, it flourished. In this small part of the world, mankind created an enchanted landscape, a paradise for wildlife. Centuries ago, the edges between natural and cultivated lands were not precise, and even by the Middle Ages, the inaccessible swamps and marshlands between the Vltava and Lužnica rivers were being transformed into a network of ponds and linking canals. In the heart of modern Europe, these wetlands are still ruled by the ancient rhythms of the natural world. Strangely, perhaps, the beginnings of this almost fairy tale landscape began with a fish, the carp. And the carp has an even stranger history. Originally from Asia, carp were brought to Europe by the Romans. Before long, it had established itself in lakes and rivers along the Danube. Then later in the 12th century, monks took some carp from the Danube and released them in the rivers and wetlands of Bohemia. Carp has always been a popular fish, especially in the Middle Ages during the Christian season of Lent. Then the Christian calendar had around 150 days of fasting. Meat was off the menu, so the monks were pleased instead to have a fish which was both nutritious and healthy. Carp even became a traditional part of Christmas, as Christmas Eve was also a day of fasting. Carp was not an easy fish to catch in the almost inaccessible backwaters. It took patience and skill. Yet the carp is an ideal fish to breed and farm in shallow ponds, as it thrives in water with a low oxygen content. The monks soon realized this and began to farm carp in the swamps close to their monastery. It was hard work, but the monks soon changed the first small fish ponds into an extensive system of aquaculture. Today, there are around 500 fisheries to the north of Třebon and Český Krumlov, about halfway between Vienna and Prague. They are bordered by the river Vltava, which has its headwaters in the forests of Bavaria, and the Lužnica River, which springs in northern Austria. The first ponds date back to the 12th century, but the golden age of pond building was in the early 16th century. The largest one, completed in 1590, is the Rosenberg Pond. It's the largest European fish pond, and sometimes it's called the Bohemian Sea. There was insufficient rainfall to maintain the ponds, so a complex and sophisticated system of dams and canals was constructed to ensure a constant supply of fresh water. To protect against flooding, the Nova Reka, or New River, was dug to drain water from the Lužnica River. This new river was built by Jacob Gritchen, a renowned architect and engineer, who wrote to his patron Peter Vogt of Rosenberg, "May your lordship be advised that with the gracious help of the Lord, I have introduced the river Luzhnitsa into the river Strazki, and since yesterday, the former is joined with the latter." The works were extensive. The banks of a single pond could be several kilometers long and as high as 10 meters. Oaks were planted to stabilize the banks. Many of the original trees are still living. Some are over 400 years old. And almost everything that was built here almost 4 centuries ago still functions today. The Slatter Stoker, or Golden Channel, is a 45-kilometer-long artificial channel, still supplying fresh water to the fish ponds that it was built to connect. Even the old locks still work. These medieval ponds and canals have left their mark on the land. Gradually, century after century, nature has taken back these artificial wetlands. There are approximately 500 ponds of different sizes, still the largest carp fisheries in Central Europe. Yet despite the scale of the engineering works, few visible traces remain. The water flows gently past the banks of the Golden Channel, which are now transformed into an impenetrable wilderness. Wild animals have learnt to share the fishing grounds with humans. The dense thickets even conceal animals as large as a moose. They came originally from Poland and almost unnoticed moved into the habitat provided by the wetlands of the south. Now they have established a resident and stable population. Over the centuries, this man-made landscape became wilderness. Over 150 species of bird have been recorded breeding here. The small and beautiful blue tit prefers nesting in old trees, and the oaks are perfect. Stag beetles are found here too, and no surprise as oak forests are their preferred habitat. When two males meet, their huge upper mandibles lock together as each tries to force his rival off the branch. Mating is serious business, and no quarter is asked or given. There will only be one winner, and to the victor, the spoils. The woodlands are a perfect habitat for red deer. In the autumn, during the rut, these forests on the banks of the ponds echo to the bellowing and roaring of the stags. In the Middle Ages, when the inaccessible swamps were transformed into the system of ponds, as each was built, it was recorded in a register. Each was given a name. This ancient artificial wetland is recognized as a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. It's a remarkable and extraordinary landscape and shows that man and nature can successfully coexist. In the bitter winter months, the ponds transform into brittle mirrors of ice. The surrounding woodlands seem deserted, but they have not been abandoned. Red deer eke out an existence by foraging for anything edible under a thick blanket of snow. During winter, finding any food becomes a survival challenge for almost every animal. Only a few places are free of ice, but expert divers can always find something. For European otters, wintertime is party time. Their thick fur insulates them from the frigid air and also the icy water. But while the otters may be active, very little else is. Carp spend the winter months where the water is deepest and won't freeze completely. Their metabolism slows down and they keep any movement to an absolute minimum. Lucky for the otter, and unluckily for the carp, they are easy prey. Those birds that try to avoid the freezing water have to make do with the otter's leftovers, and there is no shortage of opportunities. Jays gladly accept the invitation to dine. Plant food at this time of the year is scarce and hard to find. Normally, the European otter is solitary, but this female is still providing for her cubs from the previous year. They'll usually stay close to their mother for over a year, until they learn to fend for themselves. On some of the winter days, flocks of waxwings, nomadic birds from the taiga forests of the north, gather near the ponds. White-tailed eagles come from Scandinavia to spend their winter in the south of Bohemia. And even though there is a large domestic population of eagles, there are enough fish to go round. But some eagles still try to steal a meal. But it's not over yet. The size and weight of the fish make it hard to carry. And he doesn't want to risk another attack. But at last, he finds a safe refuge where he can start to tear into his prey using his beak and razor-sharp talons. By the end of February, there's a new sound in the air. The geese are starting to return from their wintering grounds. slowly winter loses its grip on the landscape. Tufted ducks can again dive for their favorite food, mussels and snails. Tens of thousands of waterfowl will soon arrive to spend the summer months in Bohemia's wetlands in the heart of Europe. The blue-throat has also returned. It's time to nest and breed. In early spring, the ponds become center stage for a quite extraordinary display. The moor frogs are starting to court and mate. For a few days only, the males turn completely blue. In fact, as more and more moor frogs gather, the bluer they become. While some females have already spawned, others are still busy mating. And when it comes to courting, the great crested grebe has far more to offer than just looks alone. Brown hares try to impress with speed and strength. Perhaps there's some truth in the mad March hare. A mass of frog spawn can hold as many as 3,000 eggs. The females leave the water as soon as they have spawned. The males stay a little longer, but their offspring are on their own. The graceful and stylish courtship display of the great crested grebe has paid dividends. Once the weed platform for mating has been finished to her satisfaction, the female is ready to receive the male. The early morning mists still shroud the land with an almost autumnal mood, but the life in and around the ponds is approaching the annual peak. Throughout the forests and wetlands, no matter if high in the trees or hidden amidst the reeds, animals are mating and breeding, or already feeding their young amidst a landscape changing with the seasons. great reed warblers have returned to the bushes along the banks of the ponds. With loud calls, they mark their summer territory. A little bittern tries hard to hide itself from view, seeming to move only in slow motion. It is superbly camouflaged within the reeds that surround its nest. The eggs are incubated for 2.5 weeks. Then the chicks hatch out. Close by, the pendulum tit delicately weaves a hanging nest. The bird gets its name from the elaborate pear-shaped nests that hang down from branches. The male uses what he can find: plant fibers, spiders' webs, and animal hair to weave his nest. And when finished, all that remains is to secure it to the branch. The young of the night heron have already hatched. Usually, these birds feed at dawn and dusk, but now they have young to feed. They are active throughout the day. Both male and female take turns guarding their young. They won't leave the nest until they are between 3 or 4 weeks old. But even then, the parents must still continue to feed their chicks with frogs, fish, and insects. The young do not become independent until around 2 months old. Red kites prefer strong and high trees, and this pair have built their nest next to one of the ponds. The open waters are an ideal hunting ground for these raptors. The young depend on their parents for up to 2 months, and both adults are busy hunting small mammals and birds to feed their rapacious offspring. Throughout the wetland, it's the same story. A steady procession of adults flying to and from their nests with food. By the side of a pond, in a hidden place between the reeds, 5 young marsh harriers have hatched. It's difficult to believe that these chicks, still with pink skins showing beneath their down feathers, will grow to have a wingspan of up to 130 centimeters. At least they are now old enough to be safely left alone so both parents can hunt at the same time. Constantly coming and going between nest and hunting grounds, both parents bring in a never-ending supply of food: songbirds, fish, rodents and frogs for their ravenous chicks. On the open pond water, the great crested grebe is also busy seeking food for its young. In fact, an entire colony has built their floating nests close to the bank. And in a direct contrast to the marsh harrier, great crested grebe chicks are precocious and able to swim straight away. But if a parent is close, they much prefer a piggyback ride. Over and over again, the parents maintain their nest with reeds and plant material. Perhaps the chicks really should get used to the water. they're not at all interested yet. No matter how hard the parents try to convince them, the chicks just don't want to know. There'll all too soon be time enough for the hard world away from the warm feathers of Mum or Dad. The great reed warblers can hardly keep up with the demands. 5 hungry mouths are constantly agape, begging to be fed. But as soon as the parent flies off, the young crouch deep down in the nest and remain motionless and silent. And the grebes are still busy. Safe on their parents' back, they are now slightly less reluctant to explore the outside world. Both parents will put up with this for the first 2.5 months or so. But eventually, their patience wears thin. The adult takes a dive and leaves the chick floating. But as soon as the adult surfaces, the chick is single-minded in its determination to clamber back and snuggle down again amongst the warm feathers. A quick snack. And the life raft, once again, becomes a submarine. Grebes can dive as deep as 20 meters and hold their breath for as long as a minute. And so the game goes on and on, but gradually the chick learns that water can actually be fun. Carp like waters that are shallow and warm. They feed on bottom-dwelling pond creatures such as insect larvae, snails and worms. Beneath the surface, the reed jungle is an important refuge for many small animals. And it is also the nursery for the moor frogs. The tadpoles have grown, and after almost 3 months, they metamorphose into frogs and leave the pond. This underwater jungle is a strange and alien world, filled with life. Water stick insects are ferocious predators, hunting mosquito larvae and water beetles. Dragonfly larvae hunt small crustaceans and insects. Everywhere, grotesque-looking creatures seem to be lurking. The next generation of mosquitoes hang upside down from the surface, like strange fruit dangling seductively from a tree. For the water stick insect, the hunting is easy, like plucking at fresh fruit. while the nymph of a southern hawker snatches a backswimmer. These alien-like creatures all have one thing in common. They are ferocious predators. They all rely on the tangled jungle of reeds. If they were to disappear, the ponds would lose much of their diversity, and many of these tiny creatures would be gone. But so far, nothing has upset the natural balance and the rhythm of the seasons since the ponds were first built, centuries ago. Despite intensive farming, the reed beds were always spared. These artificial wetlands are a place where humans and nature exist side by side. But of course the carp still need to be fed. It's essential not to overstock the ponds, to guarantee a sustainable coexistence of fish culture and wetland wildlife. And so long as the carp aquaculture is controlled, even the birds can benefit from the abundance of fish. In other regions, the white-tailed eagle is becoming scarce. But in the south of Bohemia, their population is growing. These birds rely for their survival on large bodies of water with plenty of food. So for them, this man-made patchwork of ponds and forests is an ideal environment. From their nests high in the trees, the birds scan their territories. Every year, new materials are added to their nests, which can measure 2 meters across. And as the years pass, the nest gets heavier and heavier. White-tailed eagles aren't fully fledged until they are about 3 months old, so the parents must continue to feed them. The chicks in the nest opposite rock back and forth as their tree sways with the gusting summer wind. Perhaps it takes their mind off food for a while, but the parents are never too far away. As summer reaches its peak, violent thunderstorms and downpours are common. Years earlier, a small population of moose established itself in the south of Bohemia. They enjoy browsing on the plentiful grasses, twigs, leaves and water plants. this time of the year, the fish stocks in the ponds are checked. The fishermen catch the carp, sort them by size, and then release them in different ponds. The season is changing once again. The hot days of summer are coming to an end. Exposed to the heat, the leaves are gradually losing their lush green color. Autumn is not far off, and the morning dew sparkles in the sun. All around the ponds, dragonflies are starting to emerge. Below the surface, an emerald damselfly is about to hatch. After almost 2 months, the nymph is ready to emerge from the water. The emerald damselfly is one of the commonest of the dragonfly species in Central Europe. All they need are small insects to feed on and stagnant water to lay their eggs in. The nymph climbs from the water and up the stem of a plant, then sheds the last of its larval skin and transforms into a perfect adult. But before it can fly, it must first dry its wings. Grass snakes have already laid their eggs in one of the embankments. Now in late summer, the young start to break out. They use a special egg tooth to cut through the leathery skin of the egg. But there is no great rush to leave the safety of their nest. Some of the young snakes stay close to the eggs. But others head straight for the water. At only 20 centimeters long, there is safety in the ponds. Summer is drawing to a close. The young night herons have fully fledged and can fly. But in contrast, the marsh harrier's chicks are still in the nest. They are busy practicing flapping their wings, building strength in their muscles, but until they are between 5 and 6 weeks old, they are grounded. Even when they can fly, they'll still be fed for another couple of weeks. Only when they are 2 months old will the juvenile marsh harriers leave the nest and become independent. The young grebes are still demanding attention too. Although they can now dive, they'd much rather be fed by their parents and will be dependent on them for as long as 11 weeks. Looming storms herald the changing season. Eurasian coots are gathering. They hibernate where the water won't ice over. Migratory birds also flock along the shores of the pond. And one of the young red kites ventures out for his first attempt at hunting. They're not fussy eaters and prey upon small mammals, but are not above trying to steal another raptor's catch if the chance arises. They'll even take carrion if nothing better can be found. The young eagle is also out on its own. Just like adult birds who haven't been able to establish their own territory, young eagles must fly far and wide as they hunt. Until they have perfected the skill of an aerial attack, it's far easier to look for dead or injured fish in the shallow water. These pond systems can sometimes be almost like a fast food shop. As autumn settles in, the pond waters become calm once again. The riverside forests put on a show of colour. The time has come to drain many of the ponds and harvest the fish. The air is full of the smell of wet mud, and the wading birds stalk the shallow water for food. It's easy pickings. The ring plover finds its fill of larvae and mollusks. Now there are only a few deep channels remaining, and these attract the birds in their never-ending search for food. And then silence descends upon an altered landscape. Dawn. The beginning of November. Winter is close. As it has for centuries, first light brings the fisherman. It's a timeless scene. The pond has been harvested hundreds of times before, and the methods haven't changed. The men use long sticks to beat the water, driving the carp before them. Then, using nets, any escape from the pond is closed off. A gill net is put up, just like a fence. The men close the circle, making it ever smaller, herding the fish closer and closer together. At last, the harvesting can begin. Once removed from the heavy netted baskets, the fish are taken and weighed and sorted. The region now produces 3,200 tons of carp every year, and most of the catch is destined for the Christmas table. Times change. At the end of the 16th century, only about 200 tons were produced. All that is left is the wet and slimy mud, another opportunity for the birds to take what is left behind. In 1583, the embankment engineer Jacob Gritchen wrote, "My lord, I have ordered that good carp be caught for your kitchen. But wherever they may be eaten, we trust that we shan't have to be ashamed. For I can assure your lordship in all truth that I have never in my life eaten carp as big and fat as these." Since the first ponds were dug in the Middle Ages, the way in which the fish are farmed has not changed at all. The ponds are not a natural wilderness, yet they have become a refuge and sanctuary for many species of wild animals. So long as human greed and ambition are not allowed to run wild, and while nature is treated with care and respect, these artificial wetlands of Bohemia will ebb and flow with the seasons of the year for centuries to come.